Christine Connor with Amelie Scott Designs. We've just put out a new pattern on our website called the Easter Bunny Table Topper, and this is what it looks like when it's all completed. You can download that for free. Today in this video I'm going to show you how to satin stitch around the bunnies. So the first thing you want to do is take a piece of fusible web. This is Heat and Bond Light. It has paper on one side and a glue on the other side. And trace the pattern, the bunny pattern, onto the paper side of the fusible web. Then you're going to take the wrong side of the fabric. I have a bright pretty orange on one side and this is the wrong side, and I'm going to press the glue side of the bunny to the wrong side of my fabric. Once you have glued the paper, the fusible web to your fabric, we're going to cut along the lines of the bunny with some good scissors. Now I would have all my pie pieces, you'll have 6 of these pie pieces like this. I would have all 6 of them sewn together, and I would have all my bunnies laid out. That way you can lay out your bunnies the way you like it, and then you can go ahead and peel the paper backing off. And you would position your bunny in a place that's pleasing to you. I kind of finger press mine in half so that my ears could be in the center. And you want to make sure you're at least a ½ inch from the edge of from the curved edge, because a ¼ inch of that will be your binding, and you don't want to cut off your bunny bottom with your binding. So I'm going to go press this on, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here I press my bunny onto my wedge shape. Before I begin appliquing though, there are a couple things I want to do. First of all, this is going to be a satin applique stitch, and I like to put an open toe presser foot on my machine. The open toe allows me to see what I'm doing. The second thing I like to do is I like to play a bit with my stitch before I actually start sewing on my bunny on my final project. So I've got a piece of scrap here, and I've adjusted my stitch length to my stitch width to 4.0 millimeters or 4 millimeters, and I've tightened my length, I've decreased my length to 0.5 millimeters. And this is, I'm going to just test that and see how that looks. When you're testing your satin stitch, there are a couple things you want to look for. So in my first test of my stitch, this is my 5.0, it's a little bit gappy. You can see that there's some spaces between the stitches. So I went ahead and I tightened it up even more on my machine to 0.4 millimeters. It's 0.4 millimeters, and I like that look a lot better. You don't want it so tight that you're stitching in the same place and your machine is not moving forward, because that's just going to create a mess. Now the next thing I strongly recommend, if you've never done any satin stitch applique, is I would strongly suggest you trace another bunny, glue it onto another piece of fabric, and practice. Excuse me. When I start, I always want to make sure that my needle comes down right on the very outside edge of the bunny. And I like to start at the ear because that piece is a little bit straight. The one place I want to avoid starting would be right on the inside corner. So I'm going to start on the outside, and I'm going to start stitching. And when I stitch, you notice that, let me just pivot down, you notice that all my stitches are on the bunny. They're not half on the bunny, half on the fabric. If you do half on the bunny, half on the fabric, what happens is the fabric starts rolling up underneath on this side. And so I like to keep all my stitches on the bunny, and I also like to have my needle will always stop on the, when it punctures the outside of the stitch, it will always be on the outside edge. And as I go around, I pivot gradually. Now, whenever I stop, I always want to stop on the outside. I need to kind of turn my fabric just a little bit here so that I'm keeping my stitching going more in a straight line. So anytime you have to turn, if you're on the outside of edge of the bunny, you always want to stop with your needle on the outside, do your pivot, and then continue. Now, when you get to an inside corner, let me just back up here. You can see I'm at the other side of the bunny. See how the corner goes inside? Anytime you come to an inside corner, you want to make sure that you stop with your needle on the inside. So I'm going to move my needle one more stitch so it stops on the inside. And actually I'm going to go a little bit more. I wasn't quite there. Now I can pivot a little bit, because when I stitch, I want to stitch over the stitches that I just made. Makes it look a little nicer. Still on the inside, so I'm going to stop on the inside, pivot a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. And then now I can straighten up and go my merry way. I'm now on, you see, an outside corner, so anytime I stop to pivot, I will want to be on that outside corner. And this is what's really nice about the open toe applique foot. It allows me to see exactly what I'm stitching. Okay, so I'm coming back into my inside corner. Inside corner means I stop on the inside. Now I can pivot around, do a couple stitches so I can straighten myself back up, and then away I go. I'm on an outside corner, so I need to stop with the needle on the outside. If you have a needle down function, it's a really good thing to activate at this point. I just activated mine. One of the nice things too about keeping your needle always puncturing the outside edge is it helps you to keep your satin stitch really smooth, because it's really easy when you're going around curves for your satin stitch to get all wobbly. And that kind of acts as a guide for your sewing. One more, I'm on the inside, so I need to stop with my needle on the inside, pivot, so I can cross over these little stitches right here a little bit. 1, 2, straighten out a little bit, and there I go. Stopped on the inside, I'm going to pivot. Now my little corner up here, my curve up at the top, I'm going to be doing a lot of pivoting because that's kind of a steep curve. So it's an outside curve again. I'm going to stop on the outside, pivot, do a couple stitches, stop on the outside, pivot. A lot of little pivots here. Now, we are coming into probably the hardest one. That's that inside point in the rabbit ears. And you notice I left that for the last. What I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start kind of curving into it just a little bit. Okay, now I'm at the center. My needle is at the very center of the bunny. I'm going to sew one more stitch out, and then I'm going to pivot. And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create this little fan shape, this little curved area with these stitches, just by kind of pivoting. I don't want to get too thick in the middle. Oops, I violated my own rule, didn't I? Let me go back. Okay. Oops, stop on the inside. Keep wanting to stop on the outside. Stop on the inside. Stitch a few more. Stop on the inside. I'm starting to pivot out. And there I am. I've gotten out of that centerpiece. Now when you get to where you started from, you're just going to stitch over a few more stitches. Just stitch right over those stitches you already have. It kind of locks them in. come out a little bit so you can see. Let me just put that over here and I'm going to mark it. And got my blue disappearing ink pen. I'm just going to draw some blue circles here. Okay. So a couple things we can do. One thing we can do is I'm going to select that my circle, which is stitch number 184 on my machine. I don't know what it is on your machine, but and then I'm going to select on my machine on my I just want one of them. A lot of machines you can do that. And I'm going to just stitch one stitch out. And I forgot to adjust the stitch. You should always practice. This is good. This is really good because this is a learning experience. You should always, I'm going to cut that out, you should always stitch the stitch on a piece of scrap before you stitch it on your project. That's what rippers are for. So let me stitch this out. Hi, Sean.
Hello.
Okay, so I'm going to hit the pattern start over button. I know this is way too big for me. When you stitch the stitch, you have to adjust the stitch, the width and length before you select just one. So, yeah, mine was at 9 millimeters. That's kind of big. Let's see, I'm going to take it down to 4 and see what that looks like. Let's see. Okay, it's kind of, I'd like my stitch to be a little bit bigger than that, so I'm going to go back in and adjust it one more time. Okay, and I like that size. That's perfect size for me. So that's the first thing I do. I've figured out what stitch I want, where it starts, and that's going to be my little eyeball. Way to drop those scissors, Christine. Do you ever have that happen where all your stuff just goes falling off your sewing table? Now, I'll tell you one thing that there are two things I love about doing this. One is it's a lot better than if I were to do it manually. The one thing I don't like, and I don't know how to fix it, is there's a little stitch right above it. You can pick that out if you want, or you can leave it in. Okay, so that's how you would do it that way. Now, another way you can do it is you can go back to your zigzag stitch that you had. And you'll want to start it off teeny tiny. Okay, so the next thing, let me get in here real close. I am going to adjust, I'm actually going to sew this by hand, and I'm actually going to adjust my stitch width as I go. There's 1, 2, I'm just really, okay, that's about where I want it. I'll probably pick up the speed here a little bit. Now I'm going to start one more, then I'm going to decrease my width. And then I'm going to do my little tie off. And that's another way you can do the eyes. I can't believe that twice I've dropped my scissors. This is really bad. And then the last thing you can do is you can do a good old-fashioned French knot. So I'll be right back. I need to go get some floss. You can do a hand embroidery stitch called a French knot. I'm going to show you how to do that. You'll need to get some embroidery floss or some pearl cotton from your local craft store, thread it onto a needle, tie a big knot, and then bring your needle up through the center of the eye. And I think you can zoom in on me now. Pull that all the way up through. And then what you want to do is you want to wrap the needle. You want to wrap the needle around 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Let me do that again. You want to wrap the needle around 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Pull it. And then you want to put the needle right back into the hole, kind of right next to the hole, not in the exact same hole, but right next to it. And then you just hold the knot down. Kind of hard to show this on a video. I'm going to hold that knot in place while I pull the needle through. And voila, there you have a French knot. You can do that with your eyes and your nose too. And that's it. Enjoy your table runner.